NTRA, Mr. Yaovi Atohoun from ICANN, and Mr. Dr. Raphael Koffi from the ECOWAS Commission. So our session is on empowering global cooperation in cybersecurity for sustainable development and peace. And several of the panelists will make some PowerPoint presentations, others will just make general remarks. But I think that learning from the youth, I'm going to flip it a little bit. And instead of starting with the panelists, I'm actually going to start by asking those of you that when you looked at the title of this session, or with reference to those that were in the morning session on cybersecurity, if there are any questions that you already have. So we ask those questions now and get them into the room so that even as our presenters are making their presentations, we can see to what extent your questions get answered. So I'm going to allow for 3 or 4 questions, if there are any, immediately in the room before we start. Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, so with that, then we're going to start with our panelists. I think in the interest of time, because we still need to finish by 6 o'clock as planned, what I will do is then start with Mr. Moctar Yedaly from the AUC, just to give us a bit of an overview in terms of the African Union and their position on cybersecurity and some of the work that they're doing in this cybersecurity space.
Thank you, Towela. As you certainly are aware of, the African Union Commission has drafted the AU Convention on Cybersecurity, Personal Data Protection, and Electronic Transaction. Actually, if I had to say them very precisely, chapter by chapter, the first chapter is about electronic transaction, while the second is about the cybersecurity and the fighting against cybercrime. But let me just, before going to specifically what the African Union is doing, to state something very important with regard to cybersecurity. First of all, and surprisingly to everybody, there is no specific definition really about cybersecurity. There is no definition of cybersecurity. This is number one. And number two, cybersecurity is everybody and everyone concerned. It is not a matter of an individual, not the country, nor a region. It is an international matter. And this is because the more we are connected, the more we are subject to attack or attacking somebody with his connection to us. And as you say in the rule of the network, the performance of a network is judged by the weakest link. So we should not have in any network a weakest link, specifically with regard to cybersecurity. The chapter with regard to combating cybercrime in the AU Convention calls for international cooperation. And that means that it is very important for everyone to exchange information on what had happened in any situation, which is actually currently very challenging because, as I was saying this morning, everyone actually wouldn't, specifically the big companies, the banks, wouldn't like to know that their network has been attacked also. And therefore, the criminals are actually using the opportunity, because since everybody is hiding information, then we cannot learn from each other what had happened, how the problem was solved, what had happened at a certain point of time. And therefore, the perpetuations and the continuation of the crimes continue and will be affecting everybody. This is why, for the sake of peace, because cybersecurity today is actually one of the key elements for the stability and peace. Because if some people think that they can also continue to have their army, to have their tanks, and then have their guns to be developed, this is not the future of the war. The war's future is actually in the cyberspace. The cyber war is actually the one defining everything. And when the war is happening, and it's the kind of not those where we can see atrocity and people being killed. Is sometimes you can erase in the cyberspace an entire country by just raising all its data, all what they do have, and all their transaction and all their critical infrastructure can be stopped, and therefore the prosperity cannot happen. So peace and prosperity are subject to one thing that is very important, is to have a strategy on cybersecurity. The AU Convention is calling for a very important process through which, in collaboration and taking into consideration the process that is within the Budapest Convention, to exchange information on what happened in every and single situation. And from there, we can build some kind of database, build some kind of capacity, build some kind of knowledge, cybersecurity knowledge, to allow people actually to really address those issues. So at this point of time, I will stop here, and I will be glad to answer to any specific question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Moctar, for giving us that continental perspective. So I'm going to move now then to a regional perspective and ask Dr. Koffi from ECOWAS, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the ECOWAS cybersecurity agenda and strategy. And I believe that there's a presentation that needs to be loaded. So you have about 10 minutes, unfortunately.
Okay.
Because we're running short of time.
Okay, if the presentation is not ready, okay, that is fine. Although the presentation is in English, I will speak in French. I hope some interpreter will be happy at this time of our conference. Donc,
good afternoon. My name is Raphael Koffi. I'm coming from CEDAW, the community of Africa, West Africa. So I will start by speaking of CEDAW, and all of us know very well Africa. We have 15 member states. We have Francophone, French speakers states, we have English speakers states, and we have 350 million citizens. Our objective is to use these for the development of our nations. And the objective is to set up a system to liberate the ICT. We have to work by and having a development by reinforcing our state and our organization. I will give you some statistics on the internet in Africa. We have 33% of the development. That means that Africa That's why we need to implement the text to enforce them. And we have some in text now that didn't or weren't put into force. And we have also the threat of cyber crime. And Nigeria in 2016 had these threats, and also in terms of fraud, and Kenya as well, and Tanzania, and also had many threats, we have a very high percentage of risks and of problems, and we have just spoken of awareness, but unfortunately we need more in terms of awareness. The fact of changing the mentality needs to be rethought. When we want to have the security, we have also we need to cooperate together, and we have to develop our capacities. Africa has a lot of potential and also has many opportunities. That's why we need to secure our cyberspace. Why we need the cooperation, and why is it important at the level of cyber security? Moctar has just said it, and I would like to say that cybersecurity is a global phenomenon, and it's a threat that can affect anyone all over the world, and that's why we need to work together and to have a collective action. I would like also to speak about the cybersecurity by speaking of the infrastructure and also the delicate or the critical data. This is a key element for us. We have to protect our infrastructure and our critical infrastructure in order to protect our economy, because once our financial system or energy system are attacked, it's a serious problem, and this will affect our economy. That's why it's really important to think of that in order to protect all of the infrastructure and also to reinforce the cybersecurity. We have to tackle two elements. First of all, capacity development, because we need to cooperate with the developed countries. This cooperation should be between governments, between institutions, and all the stakeholders in the field of ICT. At the level of CEDAW, we have three legal texts, and on the electronic transactions and protection of personal data. When we are speaking of criminality and cyber crimes, if it's very important to think that it has a personal characteristic, and that's why it should be put in our agenda. The EU convention also has covered that, and I will talk about this later. In this convention, I remarked two articles. One is 24 and the other is 25, and they tackle this problem, and they are addressing the point of protection of data. Also, we have the Budapest Convention that has a special characteristic and which is related to the cyber crime. And that's why it's very important to respect and to work according to this convention. In terms of cyber security, we have two aspects. The first one is related to fighting cyber security, and the second one is to reinforce and strengthen the cyberspace. And we have to start the cooperation by enforcing the legal aspect, because we can't cooperate without having these bases. Without having convention, like for example, the EU convention, the Budapest Convention, all of these frameworks will help us cooperate and also make progress. These texts are at different levels. It are the West Africa and at the Convention of the African continent and other conventions. So we have to establish a system in order to protect our cyberspace and to cooperate together. Also, we need to reinforce and to develop our capacities. That's what we do in CEDAW. And and it's very important that we develop the capacities of officers in charge of fighting cyber crime. And we had developed many strategies in the field of cyber security inside the CEDAW, and we have a certain philosophy in our association on both the technical and legal levels. And in our agenda of on cybersecurity, we are tackling the issue of the infrastructure and the critical infrastructure of data and information. Before concluding, I would like to speak of the perspectives of CEDAW. We have 4 axes in this regard. First one is ratification of the adopted texts, especially the text of CEDAW and the Malabo Convention. It's have been 3 years that we're working on that, and unfortunately we haven't implemented yet. And that's why we have to ratify this convention and to cooperate efficiently and on the ground. Second axe is the development of capacities in all fields, and we have to develop the capacities of all stakeholders. At the sub-region level, we started to work on the cybersecurity issue. And the third point is related to cooperation and partnership. We have to participate in many and multiple events in order to share experience, in order to learn. For example, the forum like this one, IGF, is a great opportunity, and any member state can join this forum and also learn and share experience with the other member states. We have the opportunity to share experience, to express our points of view, or even to make an objection. So, and any member state can adhere to these events. This is a good practice that can reinforce our cooperation and our work in the field of cybersecurity. And at the regional level, we will continue the implementation of the agenda with the World Bank, with the European Union, and with other partners. In order to conclude, I would like to say that one of the most important aspects is the reinforcement of capacities of different stakeholders at the African level. The member states should participate in all initiatives that will help us change the best practices or our practices, and also help us in developing our capacities. Finally, I would like to say that in order to succeed in this objective,
I think it's been a good overview in terms of what ECOWAS is doing, but also just giving us some perspectives in terms of the significance of why we should actually care about cybersecurity, not only from the peace and stability perspective, as was mentioned by AUC, but also in terms of trade and regional integration as well. So we'll move on now to the next presentation. So I'm taking you from the continent to the region and now to the country. So we'll hear now from Dr. Sherif on the Egyptian experience with cybersecurity.
Thank you very much. Okay, it is my pleasure to be here and to share with you some thoughts about cybersecurity developments in Egypt. Next, please. When it comes to cyber threats, we can classify them in different ways. Among them is highlighting, of course, a distributed denial of service attack, which is very common, an attack of traffic that can cripple networks, whether they are communication networks for telecommunication purposes, or could be networks that are used for banking, for healthcare, for education, for transportation. And we have seen attacks of that nature very recently, whether in Europe, where Ukraine was suffered from a power outage for about 10 days because of such an attack. This can escalate to a full-fledged cyber war, and there are different definitions depending whether you are a technocrat like myself or a diplomat or otherwise a military person. But cyber wars in general engage attacks on multiple sectors concurrently at the same time, not just to attack one sector, but to attack telecommunication, transportation, food distribution, banking at the same time. We have seen something similar to that happening in Estonia in 2007. It can be on its own, it can be coupled by traditional warfare. We have data breaches, and data breaches, again, they evolved from really getting into massive databases for stealing bank accounts or personal identities, or it could be in the form of ransomware, like what happened a few months ago, and it affected even a very developed country like the United Kingdom, where hospitals, they suffered from really ransomware attacking the healthcare system, crippling its ability to provide healthcare services because of really the databases were locked, and physicians and the healthcare providers couldn't provide services sometime in some places for a few hours or few days. Espionage, and that's again, it could be state-oriented attacks to really make another state look bad. It could be manipulating the infrastructure, again, along the same lines, or for propaganda. And some of these attacks can be launched by state actors. And the challenge of cyber threats is that in many cases, they can be, really organized by organized crime and criminals within the border of the country or from a different country. Next, please. Highlights on where Egypt stands. Currently, the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, provides some guidance, a global cybersecurity agenda that was developed in 2008, and they have an index that measures the development of countries along 5 lines, including legal, regulatory, organizational, capacity building, international collaboration. And Egypt ranks, we are very proud to say, very highly. We are 14th among 193 countries within that norm. We also have, I'd like to share with you that we started our CERT, Computer Emergency Readiness Team, in 2009 after debating. I think the debate happens in many countries whether we should have a separate team or to serve as a national resource or sectoral resource, or we rely on the security professionals within the IT. At the end, we established that CERT, and I think immediately within a few weeks, it was only serving the ICT sector, it was also serving the government sector, the financial sector and others. The CERT provides proactive services like penetration testing, assessing the vulnerabilities in networks. We provide services at no cost for major organizations in critical infrastructure. And that is done not only for the ICT sector, but also in the financial and other governmental, whether it is private or government-owned entities. We provide about 150 such reports, as well as we provide reports to prosecutors, law enforcement agencies, and others. There was a talk about really having the convention. It's very important to have a convention and legal framework, but it's also more important really on the ground to have teams that are able to translate these legislations into active action plans to combat cybercrime. Next, please. We realized that moving from our sector to other sectors, it relied on professional relationships, and that can take us so far. We realized that, again, that's based on recommendations even from the ITU. I had the privilege of working with colleagues at the ITU about 9 years ago, drafting global cybersecurity agenda. And that model comes from the ITU recommendation, having a high-level government body. In our case, it's a Supreme Council for Critical Information Infrastructure and Cybersecurity, established at the highest level of executive government, which is the Cabinet of Ministers, involving key organizations involved with security, ICT sector, critical sectors. They are all members. That council was formed in January of 2015, was mandated with developing a national cybersecurity and CIIP strategy. The strategy was developed, was endorsed earlier this year in May of 2017. It has a few pillars, including, of course, legal, regulatory. Among really the issues that are highlighted in the National Cybersecurity Plan is the classification of critical infrastructure, knowing and detecting critical infrastructure within a country. This is not, there is no manual for a country. You have to develop that manual of really what are your critical infrastructure, classifying your systems and your data, classifying your professionals and the persons in charge with operating such networks, making sure that they are trained, that they have procedures for cyber resilience, for incident handling, for manipulating really or maneuvering around attacks if they exist. And at the same time, we have a component for research and development. It was mentioned several times during the course of the sessions of last 2 days, is if you don't develop indigenous solutions, research and development capabilities, innovation solutions within your country, then it means that you are importing everything and you are by definition vulnerable. Also, we have awareness raising, protecting children, everything. We try to touch upon main things in our national cybersecurity strategy. The development started, the implementation already started. Next, please. And we will be updating, and we would be happy to share our experience with our colleagues across Africa. I'd like to share with you our experiences also in capacity building. Early on in the CERT, we realized that really when we had an incident, reaching out to professionals within a company, within government, and so forth, was critical to handle this. And we have to develop this ahead of time. So I think this is the only experience worldwide that I know of, that the National Telecom Regulatory Authority actually fund a training program in various sectors, not just in ICT sector. It costed $1.2 million plan for training 179 professionals in 38 organizations, getting multiple certificates, very high level, to make sure that the operators, the persons in charge of running different components in our critical systems, they have the basic background, not just the basic. Some of them got very advanced degrees and certifications. We also work with colleagues in the Asia-Pacific region, Islamic countries region, the Arab and African region. We just had a team that participated in a cyber drill in Tanzania a couple of weeks ago. Next, please. International cooperation at the highest level is needed. Really appreciate the efforts of the African Union to endorse the African IGF and to support really collaboration, cooperation in this regard. I have to highlight that I had the privilege of joining the United Nations group of government experts. It's high level. I really lobbied for inclusion in our first report, is expanding that group and including more countries in Africa. The group accepted this, the UN endorsed it, and we had several participants, including, I'm very proud to see we have an expert from Kenya. She's making excellent contribution to that group in the following rounds. So I'd like to also appreciate the support, because we made the point that Africans really count, and African contributions add value. Also, I would like to highlight that Egypt was behind establishing Council Working Group for Child Online Protection at the ITU. We participate in various fora. Next, please. We hosted several events, including we had the group from Tanzania and we have groups from Uganda. We exchange visits. We have regional cooperation with Arab countries. And we look forward. We are a founding member of Africa CERT. I encourage your countries, or everybody who is here, to look for Africa CERT that was established within the AfriNIC framework. There is a long way to go, but we started to develop framework for capacity building and supporting African countries establishing CERTs. I encourage you to look this up. I hope that the African Union would endorse our initiatives. It's a really volunteer effort at this point between African professionals. Next, please. We hosted in this very hotel last year, as I mentioned in the opening remarks, a regional cybersecurity conference. It was a little bit tricky because we convinced two organizations, the ITU and FIRST, to join together in organizing this event and to target not only African, but also Arab countries. So it was really a combined effort. We need to build on, really partnership and build these bridges across different continents. And you know, Sinai, technically speaking, it's an African IGF, but we are in Sinai, which is in Asia. So it's really, it's another bridge being created here. We had 440 professionals from 37 countries who spent 1 week working together, engaging in training. There was training provided by the Japanese CERT. There were engagements by professionals from across the world. Next, please. By the way, the second conference of that nature, a combined conference, was held also in Tanzania a couple of weeks ago. Several challenges that we face when we talk about frameworks for developing national strategies. It is key to have vision, to have a strategy, to have a policy declared at the national, at the regional level, to have very dynamic frameworks. Cybersecurity threats will change and are changing. We have Internet of Things, we have cloud, we have big data, we have AI, we have many emerging technologies, cloud. They are really major technologies that adds value to our lives, improve really the life, I would say, the level of service provision at the level of the government, at the level of the individual, at the level of organizations. So they add value to all of us. But we need to make sure that they are secure and we build trust in these systems. We also need to witness and be very careful with interdependencies between different sectors when we address cybersecurity issues. We at the national level, we don't want to work in silos. A failure in a power outage will result in telecommunication outage. A power and telecommunication outage will result in failure to provide healthcare services or banking or transportation or other sectors. So it is very rare that you see in a country that you have these type of interdependencies and a domino effect that you see with the cybersecurity threats. We need to develop our skills, the skills of our professionals at the highest level. We develop trust ahead of time, and we need to be dynamic in dealing with all this. Next, please. That's my last slide. Here, we need to pay attention to emerging technologies. These technologies promise prosperity to our population, to our nations, to Africa. We need to endorse them. IoT is really improving the quality of life that we live. So, but we need to be careful that we address privacy, security, transparency, and we have these models ahead of time. We have the regulations ahead of time. You don't regulate AI, you regulate AI deployment in healthcare, AI deployment in transportation, and so on and so forth. That's why we need to work with professionals across various disciplines and to make sure that we learn from our experiences. We need to engage our teams at the international level, and this is where I call upon international and regional organizations within the UN, the African Union, the ECA, the ITU, first professional organizations. We have the NEPAD with us on the panel. All these organizations can be key players in making our life better, in enhancing our security. Our partners in the private sector, in academia, and in the non-governmental sector, they are partners for development, for planning, and for the road ahead to face these challenges. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I don't know that I can do justice in summarizing that, but I think that the point is well taken in terms of international cooperation, in terms of the need to develop capacity, but also in terms of the need for us to work together and claim our space in terms of addressing cybersecurity challenges. So I'm now going to move on to my next presenter from ICANN, and he's going to talk to us about cybersecurity and cyber safety from an ICANN perspective.
Thank you very much. From the previous, my name is Yaovi Atohoun from ICANN. You can see the roll banner of ICANN at the back, but I think after two presentations talking about some concepts, I'll be focusing more on what is ICANN, and especially when we talk about the domain name system. So next slide, please. ICANN is an organization where we have the community very involved in what we do every day. So ICANN is very open. The way ICANN operate is a bit different from other organizations. And since October 2016, now the community has another role, what we call stewardship. So what is you can also know is we are talking about IANA stewardship, IANA transition process, something that we are still working with the community. So just to mention again that when we talk about ICANN, the community is playing a very important role on everything we are doing. The community is composed by organization we call like supporting organizations, and also advisory committees. And then also within the ecosystem globally, we have other organizations we are working with closely, like ITU, ISOC, ITU, and many other organizations that are playing a daily role, working, contributing to what ICANN is doing. Next slide, please. As said, community work with ICANN defining policies. There are two things important I want to mention. If you want to communicate with our colleagues today, we use our email addresses. So I think anyone in this room has an email address. Or what I want to mention also is a name of a domain name or a website. Let's say website. So an email address or a website address, what ICANN is working in or considering more in, it works in the last part. Like here, for example, we have some addresses.eg on many documents. The last part is eg, the label ag. We have like .com, .org, we have .africa, etc. So this is what we call the top level domain. So this is what we call the top level domain. So ICANN is working with the community on the management, on defining which top level domain we can create, because there is a need to create the domain name first, and then to assign the management to one organization. So ICANN is the organization working on that. So we cannot every day create new domains. So we have to define a policy, and based on this policy, new domains are created, and we need an organization to manage the domain that is created. So like if you take the case of .africa, we see the organization managing it. If you take .eg, we know the organization managing .eg. So treats. And also, we are working in collaboration with many organizations, other organizations, when we talk about cyber security and cyber safety. Also, what we do, ICANN is doing is giving more capacity to various community members, like the GAC, for example, the Governmental Advisory Committees, and the registrars, for example, and other community members. So ICANN has various programs to do training to help these people to be prepared against attacks or security issue. Next slide, please. So the DNS abuse is simply the use of the naming system for malicious purposes. So on the next slide, we'll be talking about the next slide, please. We're going to understand better what is the domain name system. But the DNS, for example, is something we're also going to talk about in detail in the next slide. Is a secure a measure we need to take to better secure the domain name system. The next slide. The next slide, please. If you see this slide, for example, it's just a simple example. When we talk to get a picture, a clear picture of what we call the domain name system. So on the left, the first column, you have the client, which can be any one of us here. Like if you want to go to a website, for example, you type the address of that website. In this case, we have www.icann.org. As I said before, we have the last part of the name, which is the top level domain. And this is the area ICANN is managing. And we have something we call the root zone. When we see the right, for example, we have at the top in the green, that is where we have the root. So when you are in this room, or we are in our houses, we are in offices, we have our computers, and we want to reach a website, for example, we tap an address. So the system which connects us to the internet, it can be the ISP, for example, in the middle position. So we have the resolver, what is helping us to reach the destination. So our information leaves our machine and go to the resolvers, and then the system also go to the rows where we have the more information about the various top level domain. In this case, for example, you have in the green side on the right, where this is where we get information about where is .org, because the initial address is www.icann.org. So the case in green gives us the information about where is .org server. So then we are the system is redirected to the .org, and then under .org we are using for ICANN, and then also the system moves again to the servers where we have the information about ICANN, and then again after that we have from ICANN we have the information about what is www. So this is what we call the domain name system, because we tap labels, and then these labels are converted through the technology, the servers, and then converted. That help us to reach a server, a machine, or a device, because we are talking about computers. Today is not only computers, many devices. It can be a camera, or it can be something else. So the domain name system can help us, instead of to easily remember where we want to go or where we want to put our information. So this is the DNS. So imagine that this system that we have cannot help us to go to the right direction. So we cannot get the information we are looking for. On the next slide, please. So it is the same thing. So what we are doing now, I want to talk especially is the program at the ICANN level that we call the DNSSEC, Domain Name Security Extension. It's just a protocol. It's something we are encouraging people, technical people or organization managing domain names to implement. So when you implement the domain name security extension protocol, this is a way to help your system information, or the database which is giving information about where is this machine, where can you get the information about a label, not to be compromised. So this is something very important, and ICANN is working on that, is helping organizations, countries, CCTLDs to put in place this security measure. And next slide, please. So this is just an example when you have your system or the domain name system that can be compromised. So anybody, a bad person with a bad intention can get access to your system, or can have access to a system that is looking like your system. So that is something we can prevent by implementing what we call the DNSSEC. The next slide, please. ICANN also is for cyber security. ICANN is putting some measure. ICANN want to ensure that what we call the registries and the registrars, they have some measures in place to better help protect the information, to help the domain name system to be stable and not to be compromised. So for this also, ICANN is providing training and making people to be better equipped against this kind of attack related to the domain name system. Next slide, please. The DNSSEC, as I said today, if you see the data, is just a question of assigning the information. Like if you have a letter today, you send me a letter or an official document. I want to be sure that this information is the information coming from you. So one way to be sure that this document is coming from you is to sign the document. So in the same way, when we talk about the domain name system, we have information about machine servers in the database somewhere. So once this information is compromised, so we can go to a wrong direction. So to be sure that we have the right information on where is a machine located or server located, so we put there a signature. So this is a digital signature that is added to the information we have at the registries or servers level, helping in the resolution. So simply the DNSSEC is something that is helping our system to have the real information. Like if I'm telling people that my EG server is somewhere, the signature I put will tell people that this is the right information about my system. So without signature, we are not sure if it's the right or the bad information. So putting in place the DNSSEC is just adding a signature to the information. And once the signature is there, so we need to have what we call the DNS validation on the ISP level. So this is also something very important at the ICANN level to secure the system. The next slide. ICANN is in the process, as we heard in the previous presentation, is very important to change the password. ICANN implemented what we call the DNSSEC at the root level in 2010, and is a policy to change the password. So as this policy is the same thing for the key, signing the root zone. So once this key is available, people who are also validating the DNSSEC have the information about this key. So if I can change this key for signing the information, people also put in the system for resolution need to put the new information about the key. So this is what we call the key rollover. So actually, ICANN is in the process of changing the key, the signing key. So if an ISP or at the server level, we have the information about a wrong key, the key that is not correct, so it will not help the users to have access to the right information. So next slide, please. Currently, before I the root server system is just one system, but we have many servers we call by the letter from A to M, and it's possible so to have at the country level in your organization what we call a copy of the root server. So the process is very simple, and ICANN is also managing one of these servers we call the L server. So if we are interested in holding a copy of the server, we are here. We can help you to get one. And next slide, please. So what we can do for the government side, we are at IDFP here. So we need government to be involved. We need government people to participate in the GAC. Last year, ICANN organized a workshop in Nairobi for the government representative in the GAC. Also, we used to provide capacity to law enforcement organization. And also, we promote and we support the CERT. And in cooperation, for example, we are going to contribute to a workshop ITU is organizing next week in Cotonou in Benin. So ICANN is also involved working with other organizations on cyber security issue. So thank you. We'll have more time for questions.
Thank you very much. So a bit more of a technical view of cybersecurity. So my last present, and deliberately last, because we've talked so much about all these different measures, all these different things that need to happen, the legislation, the regulatory measures, and so on and so forth, the definitions of cybercrime, etc. But somebody has to enforce all these things. And I think it's very nice that my last presenter then is a law enforcement officer who is going to give us his perspectives now in view of all these things about the challenges of actually being a law enforcement officer in this hyper-connected world and how they actually deal with cybersecurity and cyber threats.
Good evening, everyone. The first challenge is I'm very tired right now. Yeah, it's true. I'm very, very tired because I just arrived, I think, at 12 at noon, and I had to be here at 2, so I haven't even had time to rest. However, I'm already here, so nothing can change. So, basically speaking, from the law enforcement family, my talk is general in nature. It doesn't actually represent the organization that I work, but general in nature because we are looking at the sub-Saharan. Our colleague from Egypt has spoken wonderful things which are unattainable for most of us in the sub-Saharan region. So basically, what I'm going to talk about may not actually touch much on the MENA region, but basically on the sub-Saharan region. We are focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the goals that actually hinges on peace, safety, and security is goal number 16, which reads, to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. As somebody from the law enforcement, I think one of the most difficult SDGs to achieve will be SDG number 16, because we are now living in a connected world. We are now living in a world which is faster than the fastest law enforcement car. It's true, crimes are happening at a rate we can't cope up with. So basically, law enforcement plays a critical role in safeguarding the peace everyone is enjoying or is striving to enjoy. However, we will live by this saying which says, old wine in a new bottle. You can get wine from 1962 and put it in a bottle for 2017, it will still be wine for 1962. That's what we found ourselves as law enforcement officers, because we failed to cope up with challenges and the technological advantage and advancements which are happening, which are hampering us from combating crime that is happening right now. So among the challenges that we face as law enforcement officers, because my talk mostly will be on challenges, solutions can only be built from these challenges, and we need to work all of us together to come up with solutions to these challenges because we are all affected. The first challenge we are facing is the issue of cybercrime. I think cybercrime was posed as one major challenge to every government, including the US government, including the British government, including the Russian government. The more advanced the government is, twice as advanced are the criminals themselves. Because of the transborder nature of cybercrime, it has become literally very impossible to put like a line and say Egypt is able to handle these types of crime. And yet attacks can come all the way from Sudan, from Cameroon, even from Mauritius, even Brazil, and still affect business here in Egypt. So basically, it is something that knows no door. It passes any door. Cybercrime knows no border. The other major challenge in cybercrime is the increase in cyber attacks. Just recently, we had ransomware, which had almost crippled most of the businesses in Europe and part of the Middle East. Of course, we might have been affected in sub-Saharan, but because of the nature of failing to share information, that information might have been withheld. There is also the issue of registration. I think to meet the challenges in terms of enforcing crime in a connected world, registration enactment is moving at a very slow pace. We still are using laws of 1992 to fight crimes of 2017. We haven't even reached 2000. We haven't even reached laws for 2010. So meaning, in as much as we want a safer place, a safer world for all, let us also enact laws that are able to meet the current threats and current crime trends. One of the other issues is the issue of mutual legal assistance. This is one issue where if somebody commits a crime from another country and that country has no mutual legal assistance in terms of extraditing that criminal to that country to face the law, it has proved to be one of the most difficult challenges for law enforcement in the area of cybercrime. Because if you are to look at the domestication of international cybercrime conventions, we are moving at a very slow pace. If you look at this, the Budapest Cybercrime Convention, there are very few African countries who have enacted and domesticated those laws. And yet we expect to fight cybercrime with laws that are in piecemeals, with laws that favors certain countries and does not favor other countries. The third challenge is the issue of institutional capacity. When I talk of institutional capacity, I'm looking at the manpower capacity of handling these issues. We are talking of the justice system. It's not only the law enforcement who need capacity to handle some of these issues. Even people from the justice system, the prosecutors, the judges. If you train law enforcement officers, quite all right, they'll get a criminal. But who's going to prosecute that criminal? And which judge is trained enough to pass a fair and straightforward judgment without favor or any inducement of any kind, like something that is done within the confines of the law. So there's need to train like everyone in the wheels of justice. All of them must be trained to handle some of these issues. The fourth one is lack of support from the private sector. I think this is one area which we are all guilty of. The technical skills, you can still provide the service free of charge. At the end of the day, it's a safety that is at risk. It's your safety, not the police's safety. The police and all other enforcement officers will basically look after your safety. No one looks after their safety. I was just talking to Aaron Barrett from Afrinic, I think during our break just a few minutes ago, I requested him that they've been spearheading the transition of the IP version 4 address. Of course, it is deprecating to IP version 6, but there was something that they overlooked, the issue of network address translation. Because basically, in as much as we are almost all running on IP version 6, I think law enforcement officers have remained behind with IP version 4. So basically, to understand the difference between IP version 6 and the advantages that IP versions, I would say from IP version 4 and the advantage that IP version 6 covers in the area of network addressing translation, I think it should take up that law. I think I discussed with him. We'll see how we'll take it up from there. Because basically it's difficult for a law enforcement officer who's trained in cybercrime and trained mostly on IP version 4, when they see an IP version 6 address, they won't even recognize it's an address. Why? Because they're still linked to the IP version 4 address system. The fifth challenge is the issue of cryptocurrency. I think we've reached a stage where instant millionaires can be created online overnight. I would imagine if I had bought 200 Bitcoins in 2009, I would have just spent about, probably I would have just spent about $200. How much is that cryptocurrency Bitcoin worth today? I would have been an instant millionaire. Unfortunately, instead of thriving on this digital currency to promote business, most businesses are hiding their money laundering activities through cryptocurrencies. There are very few law enforcement agencies who can investigate and follow up matters of money laundering and fraud where money is hidden in cryptocurrencies. It has become one of the major challenges. The sixth challenge is the issue of digital evidence. Digital evidence has proved to be very volatile, and looking at the level of capacity in terms of handling digital evidence, most African countries are still lagging behind. They would arrest somebody and probably destroy the digital evidence in the process of moving the evidence itself. There are many more issues like inadequate computer forensic tools. We had the issue of the FBI versus Apple. We know the FBI is US, it's a federal law enforcement agency of the US government, but they had a problem in decrypting information from an iPhone. If you have to imagine the US government with all its resources failing to decrypt, it means we are lacking somewhere as a law enforcement in the area of encryption. There comes the issue of digital rights. Before we are done with human rights, we haven't even secured everyone else's human rights. There pops up digital rights. Digital rights create a problem when matters of privacy versus security come into play. It's difficult to somehow like protect a nation without actually trampling on the nation's digital rights. It means either of the two, one has to give in the other, meaning at the end of the day, privacy loses and national security takes the fall. Amongst the stakeholder groups and organizations that I know that are trying at all costs in bringing law enforcement on board and making sure that they move in tandem with the rest, the first organization is ICANN through the GACS Public Safety Working Group. You should encourage your law enforcement agencies in your countries to join the Public Safety Working Group at the GACS ICANN. The other one is the Council of Europe. Through their cybercrime division, they run a program called Grassy Plus, and also the Octopus Cybercrime Conference. It's held every year. I think it's one of those platforms that will offer capacity to law enforcement. So basically, in the talk that we had today, people have highlighted so many issues. Others have spoken about successes. Others have spoken about what they are capable of offering. But what I was just talking about today was just the issue of challenges. Basically, my slide will be online by Monday. I could have done it, but because of the difference in terms of the issues I had in flights, I was not able to complete the slides on time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you're going to regret not having taken up my offer to ask questions at the beginning of the session. I now can only allow 2 questions, and absolutely only 2 questions. And I'm going to ask somebody who has not spoken at all today in any session. Please stand. Okay.
Thank you. I have not spoken at all today. My name is Bob. 2 quick questions in the interest of time. To the panelists, do you think that due process is the biggest hindrance to fighting cybercrime? And 2, do you think or do you feel that exploring the creation of special courts, for example, within our judiciaries across Africa, would enhance fighting cybercrime? China did something. Is it something that Africa should also consider?
Thank you. I'm going to take one female that has not spoken today.
Hello, I'm Wafid Dehmani from Tunisia. I want to react to Yaovi presentation. When you talked about route, the deployment of route in Africa, I think there's an agreement that was signed with Afrinic, between ICANN and Afrinic in 2012, that signed an agreement to collaborate to identify potential location of route for the expansion of route service. That is right? Does it stand? Afrinic is promoting the deployment of route in Africa today, no?
Yeah, correct. ICANN is working with ICANN in the deployment of route in Africa.
Yes, I think it is good to mention it here today in this forum.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so that was a comment, I believe. So I think what we're going to do is, by way of wrapping up, I apologize, the conversations will have to continue outside the room. I'm going to actually very quickly pass down the row from my extreme right. I'll give you a minute to wrap up, and you can also then speak to any of the questions or comments that have been raised.
Merci, modératrice. Je vais commencer par répondre à la question, donner mon opinion sur la question de Bob. Je ne pense pas que...
In my opinion, I don't believe there is an African court would be a solution, but we must have the capacity to train the key players like prosecutors and judges, and we must make them capable of fighting electronic evidence on cyber crimes. So the basis and the starting point is to train key players and to exchange information in full confidence. This in turn requires drawing a legislative framework so that we can speedily exchange information. This is my opinion, and cyber crimes are more effectively. We must protect infrastructure and apply strategies and train key players to protect our cyberspace.
and the answer mine. However, I will add something for you, Bob. While Koffi has said that there is no need to create that supra-organ court to address the issue of matter of cybersecurity, I would say simply that we do have the African Court of Justice based in Arusha. And all we have to do is to have our prosecutors and judges and to be trained on the matter of cybersecurity so they can address the issue of the global cybersecurity because of the nature of transboundary nature of the crime that can happen at any point of time. So that will be my answer to you in addition to what Koffi had said. And in the same time, just to wrap up myself, I will just go as a PowerPoint. In the field of cyberspace, anything can happen, anything, anyone, anything that is connected could be a source of crime. Number one. Number two, the transboundary nature of cybercrime force us to really cooperate. And cooperation means not only exchanging of informations, but also to address the matter of extradition, if need be, at a certain point of time. Number three, Africa needs to have something like what is embedded in a NATO agreement, what we call the Article 5, which means that anybody who is attacked in the continent is supposed to be attacked to other countries. And this has happened after the issue of Estonia in 2007, whereby the invocation of Article 5 was actually a big issue. Is it an attack or is not an attack? But finally, it is an attack, and everybody who is attacked now, attacked one of them is considered attacking others. So as Koffi said, we need to go and have legislations. We have to make sure that the Malabo Convention is really operational. And finally, some of our countries who are going through challenges of political turmoil or political instability are being used by crimes and criminals to test what kind of attack they can do before testing it to other countries. So whenever you see one of our countries, going through difficult time, please don't enjoy that. It's probably a bed for tests. And finally, when we get shut down or internet disruption or even power or water, we need to ask the company how did it happen and why did it happen. Because by asking them that question, it's maybe a cyber attack that we don't know of. And therefore, by the way, they need to know and to make the thorough analysis to say why the internet was not available, or why the communication were not available, or why the power plant was not available, or why the water was not distributed properly. Those things need to be really, we need to ask them every time. We as a citizen, we need to have an explanation why. Because it could be a cyber attack, and therefore probably will not know about it. Because 90% of the time, people also are enjoying the fact that we are appreciating the locality of things. When we don't have, when we say, oh, today is there is no water, well, we'll wait tomorrow. Or there is no power, we'll wait tomorrow. Maybe somebody has attacked us. And maybe the company does know about it. So we have to be always aware. Thank you very much.
Well, a lot has been said. I strongly agree with the fact that we have specialized courts is fine, but nothing for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is everywhere. Is in the cybercrime could be part of the penal code, could be part for digital signature, could be part of anything. So I don't envision that we have in Africa or in a country a special cyber security court, but we need to train our prosecutors, our law enforcement officers, our judges at all courts at different levels on cybersecurity. My last point should be on the African Convention on Cyberspace. We are African countries, although I encourage from a technical point of view to support the Budapest Convention. It is a Council of Europe convention. It's an excellent convention. We should go there, and maybe some countries consider joining, but our home convention is the African convention. This is we have ownership, this is we have jurisdiction, and this is really the basis for, could be the basis for our cooperation. I will end with that, and since it's my last time to talk today, I strongly encourage participants. We have had 2 very busy days, and we have another day ahead of us. Make use of your presence here in Sharm el-Sheikh. Sharm el-Sheikh is a beautiful resort. We have the sea area. So if there are breaks in early morning, if you're an early bird, this is an excellent snorkeling. So this is a bit of advertisement, so as not to miss the opportunity of being here without visiting Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just one word, which is a DNSSEC. This is a word we can take back home, DNSSEC. Because ICANN has a program to help countries, to help people managing our domain name at the top level, at the country level, to secure their zone. We call it secure, simply securing the zone. So if we go back home, we can check if our domain name for the country is signed, the zone is signed. So if it is not signed, I think we need to put a plan in place so that when we meet next year, we have more countries who have signed their zone. Currently, we have about 15 countries. So it is something very simple. We just need to plan for it. We have technical resources in our countries. It's just a question of planning and decision. So when we go back home, let's check what we can do to have at least DNSSEC, which is a way of also contributing to security, because we have many action needed, but let's see how we can contribute also to DNSSEC, to our top level domain name at country level. Thank you very much.
To add on what has already been said, based on what Bob asked, his second question about a special court, of course, it has to start somewhere. Rome was not built in a day. Looking at the technical nature of cybercrimes, I think it has to start somewhere. A special court is something that is workable. You train a few judges, a few prosecutors, and the available law enforcement. On matters of cybercrime, you transfer them to this special court. Maybe in the next 10 years, that special court will start expanding, because you can't just handle cybercrime like any other traditional crime. It needs special care. Thank you.
Thank you very much to my panelists. Can you give them a round of applause, please? So you have homework, and the homework is, number 1, you need to go and advocate for the AU Convention. Number 2, you need to go and check what's happening in your countries as far as cybersecurity, cyber legislation, DNSSEC, law enforcement, etc. Number 3, capacity building has been talked about strongly as being very important, and this must happen at so many levels, whether it is at the level of our technical people, whether it's the policymakers, law enforcement, judges, everybody. So that's another thing that we need to go and look at. Another piece of homework for all of us is that we've talked about cybersecurity as being based on collaboration, cooperation, coordination. So we need to take that message back and make sure that we agitate, and I use that word agitate, for our countries, our policymakers to begin to think differently about cybersecurity and to understand the significance and importance of it, not only for peace and stability, but also in terms of our intra-regional trade as well as regional integration. With that, I thank you all very much. You've been a very good audience, and I'm also going to be saying my goodbyes now. I wish you